I'd now like to introduce Rhys Thomas, who is a doctor up in Newcastle.
Thank you very much indeed, not least for the invitation today, but for setting me up so well with the last question. Most of you don't know me. I'm a consultant neurologist up in Newcastle. It's my first time here at the Lee Weekend, so thank you for making me feel so welcome. And I've probably got 10, maybe 15 minutes of your time to talk you through all the evidence for cannabis, cannabis-related products, Cannabidiol. So without further ado, let's start. Looking for trials, hard evidence, good information for Cannabidiol and mitochondrial disease. There's none. So if you've got any questions, I'll take your... So when you give a talk about medication, you've got to say who you've had sponsorship from in the past. But the most interesting disclosure that I've got is that there's currently a call out from the research arm of the NHS, called NIHR, asking for people to put in applications to do trials based on cannabis-related products. And I'm working with a company called Greenlight. And you can ask me about that after. So, there is a lot of attention on cannabis-related products and the ingredients from cannabis. There are hundreds of trials open in the UK, in Europe, and across the States, 500 odd. And if you look at how many states there are in, how many trials there are across the world in mitochondrial disease, you're hoping that some of these two circles are going to overlap, and there are none. There are currently no active studies where they're primarily recruiting people with mitochondrial disorders for looking at cannabis-related products. Now, some people might have been recruited because they've got a drug-refractory epilepsy, or because they've got stiffness, or because they've got other problems, but none deliberately looking to work in this area. So that's a big problem we've got, because not only do we not have the evidence, it's not being gathered for us currently. But if you went online and started looking, you'd think we had all the answers. And it speaks to a lot what Bobby said there in terms of who's got the vested interest to put this out there, because these are licensed, trademarks, available products from other territories. And it's quite easy to build a sciencey argument, because we know a little bit about mitochondria and how it works in terms of energy. We know a little bit about cannabis and cannabis-related products and how they work. And so you can find, legalize it, a link between mitochondria and memory. The link is it makes it worse, but don't let the headline ruin things there. I mean, this looks like it could come from our highly specialized services webpage. This looks like an official webpage. It's not. It's really just blurb and advertisement for a drug company. And similar, this here, I mean, this looks, yeah, even up to including, that looks like the badge for Mice Awareness Week. You know, they've really branded well, but this is all promotional. It's all sciencey, and none of it is scientific. So, how do you sort of wade your way through this? I mean, you can start off by believing that there is no evidence, but if you're trying to look through it, these types of websites will start with a bit of hand-wavy, broad picture, and then we'll talk, some people say, so anecdotes, talking from some people tell me, or people use it for, and use patient stories, or they'll say it's been proven in mice or in rats, which is great, but I don't see as many mice in clinic as I used to. Or they'll say it's being used in Alzheimer's, or it's being used in cancer, as if these diseases really speak to what we're seeing in clinic, and they won't be using the names or faces of people that you know and trust, importantly. There are some people I know within the UK landscape, and certainly in the States as well, who have direct financial conflicts because they are stakeholders or board members of drug companies that make cannabis-related products. And they don't always declare this, particularly when they're trying to promote this through social media, or even when they're presenting in front of select committees. And again, if you want me to name these people, speak to me afterwards. So this is the start of a review about cannabis products, saying it's not just that there's a bias in terms of how people report it in the newspapers and the press, but there's a big bias in terms of the medical literature as well. And I'm sympathetic to that, because these stories where children have had great responses for medications are really emotive, and they're really strong, and they're real. You know, there's nothing fabricated about this. There's nothing about who's on which board that changes the way that certain children have responded to these medications. And it might tell us something that there are super responders, that there are people who do very well, or it might tell us that the drug is efficacious or useful for some people. Or it might tell us something about how we feel about cannabis as a product. I think it's really interesting that people will come to me in clinic and say, I don't want any of these pharmaceutical tablets. You know, I'm tired of poisoning my child or my partner with chemicals. I want something that comes from a plant. And that's great, and it's really laudable, it's really interesting, but lots of the plant-based medicines that we prescribe are dirty medicines. They're medicines like digoxin, or they're like aspirin or cyanide. You know, plant-based medicines, they're not safer than lab-based medicines generally. So, any of you who've been up to Newcastle will recognise Cresta in the background, so clean lines, modern building, and somebody's brought in their cannabis oil for me, and they've asked, Doc, can you tell me what's in it? And the answer is no. And you ask, what's it like, and how much does it cost you, where did you get it from? And they ask you, well, can you give me advice about dosing? And not if I don't know what's in it. I can't. So that's one side. That's available on the high street or available online, unsure of the efficacy, and what I call an artisanal or boutique product. If you imagine a spectrum, off the screen here is Holland and Barrett homeopathic cannabidiol, which there's nothing in it because it's homeopathy. Then it's artisanal level. I think there's probably enough cannabidiol in that to get into the body. Maybe not enough to get into the brain, but certainly enough to get into the body. And then to the far side, and again off the screen the other way, is what really excites me, that we have got grade 1, top tier, randomised a controlled trial, placebo, you know, as good as you'd like in terms of the hierarchy of evidence for the use of cannabidiol in early onset genetic disorders for which not much else works, and they have lots of seizures, and broadly this feels similar. It's not mitochondrial, but we know exactly what causes it, and that's interesting. So the plant is interesting, the cannabis plant's interesting. It's got scores and scores and scores of different compounds within it. I talk about cannabidiol because that's the ingredient that's been extracted and purified mostly for scientific benefit. There are others like cannabidavrin, and there's THC, which is the bit that we worry about because it gets you high and gives you the munchies, but it may in itself be interesting because it also has an act on the brain. And then there are lots of other kind of lower level chemicals that are used for, that could be used for medicinal benefits, but really what we're talking about is purified plant-based product. You don't have to go down the pharmaceutical route. So in Denmark, they've given the physicians a 4-year window trying to work out how to use cannabis products, which includes cannabis. And so people there are being asked, what strength do I need to put in my pipe, in my tea, in my cake? Which is information that some other people might have learned at medical school, but I had my head in books perhaps, and I didn't learn that information. But it's how we got some of the information for Dravet, that other epilepsy story, because people were experimenting with their children, and we got a safety signal, we got an efficacy signal in that way. We have some evidence, because it's not just in the epilepsy and neurology world that we've been able to use this product. It has been trialled and licensed for stiffness in multiple sclerosis. Its availability is different, interesting, in England from Wales from Scotland. So I've got some limited experience with the use of this in Wales. It's a half and half product, half cannabidiol, half THC, used as a spray. And again, I'm lucky that my slide hasn't completely tumbled off the edge of the projector here. But you're looking along this side here as those little marks give you a size of the scale of the efficacy of the trial. And that big fat diamond at the bottom, the further away it is from that line, the better. And it's kind of kissing that line. So what it tells you is it works, but it's not brilliant. The product's called Sativex, so as it said, it's the spray, and it's available in different parts of the United Kingdom. In Wales, it was very strictly regulated, as you can imagine. There are also good data for cannabis-related products with regards to nausea. This is really interesting, and again, it's not something I've got personal experience with its use, but in chemotherapy, and particularly the nausea you get with AIDS drugs, it's got a big role. It's better than placebo. It may be better than other anti-sickness drugs, and it's most useful when you ask patients, which drug do you prefer? They seem to prefer that above the others, so I don't know if it's about their feeling about where it comes from or whether it is just more tolerable. But it's an interesting drug. And then the medicine that is of real interest to me from the epilepsy point of view is this medicine called Epidiolex. So that's what the evidence has been gathered for. It's available in the States and has been for about a year now. The legal situation changed in the United Kingdom last autumn, so it became legal to prescribe, but not licensed. So it's legal to prescribe, but not licensed. I have under good authority that the number of children actually taking this is very, very few. You know, I drive a Mini, they might all fit in the back. You know, it's that kind of level. There are very, very few people actually taking this in the United Kingdom, outside of the cases who are shipping it in from abroad. When we want to know if an epilepsy drug works, there's a standard that we sort of ask, which is, could it reduce the number of seizures people have by half? Now, that's not a great number, but that's sort of what we have. So if you're having 2 a month, can it be 1 a month? If you're having 50 a month, can it be down to 25? That's the standard. And most epilepsy drugs look like this. So it behaves just like all the rest of the other epilepsy drugs, like phenytoin, like topiramate, like every other drug that's been trialled. About half the kids who take it have half their seizures reduced, which is good. So it proves it probably works. It's not better than the other drugs, but it proves it probably works. And in terms of the side effects are gastrointestinal, a bit of hypersalivation, and with the hypersalivation came some pneumonia, which is a bit of an issue, and the drowsiness could pretty much be mitigated against if they reduce some of the other anti-epilepsy drugs, because it had, as I said, the plant-based drugs often fight with each other, so there were some drug fights with the cannabis drugs. The legal status is interesting because as we continue to do work in this area, often there are social changes as well. And I think it's really interesting to consider how conservative and socially conservative America is. And there have been big changes state by state in terms of the situation from medicinal products to then recreational products. And I think it's really important that when we try and build up the evidence for the medical use of cannabis-related products in the United Kingdom, we're not hijacked by people who want to be changing the law for other reasons. But you know, there are big swathes of the United States for which even recreational cannabis is available, let alone the readily available nature for medicinal cannabis. Thank you. Probably not very important, but it's kind of interesting to work out where we put drugs in terms of their legal status. There are schedules from being most restricted, Schedule 1, down to least restrictive. So pick something from Schedule 1. We'll have, say, LSD, Schedule 1, no real medicinal benefit from LSD. Down to, so at the bottom here, there's cough medicine, right at the bottom here. So that's Schedule 1 through 5. And across the top, we've got just how harmful it could be, ABC. So interestingly, we have some ecstasy here down as most harmful, and that's not based on evidence, it's political from the 90s. Before we had the law change, cannabis was in its Schedule 1, you know, so most restricted and medium in terms of harmful, and that's what the change in the law last autumn really gave us, because there was no way you could get anything in this top row legalised for prescribing, because it's so harmful and so dangerous. And that's why it's really important to have all that evidence. Try and find ketamine. Ketamine's interesting. So we've got a new drug for depression coming later this year, maybe early next. It's based on ketamine as a spray called esketamine. And Sativex, I mentioned, that's the spasticity multiple sclerosis drug there. So that's the legal situation. Headlines like this in The Guardian don't help. My poor secretary's phone rang off the hook with the headline, "Doctors will be able to prescribe cannabis medicine next month." And they've not believed me every month since when I said, look, it's legal, but not licensed, so I can't prescribe it. There are plenty of other things I can prescribe, though. Because even if we put valproate, we mentioned before, sodium valproate epilim in brackets, there are some people for which we may not prescribe it. We have epilim here. We have got scores and scores and scores and scores of other good anti-epilepsy drugs. Now, bromide right at the beginning here, 1850, may not be a drug that we're using, but a lot of the old drugs we are. Phenytoin, primidone, carbamazepine, ethosuximide, right the way up to medicines that are coming off the top. I'm an optimistic chap, so I put Cannabidiol in for 2019, might be 2020, 2021, and the new drugs keep coming too. This is where we currently are. So if I go onto Twitter and I want to know what people are saying about cannabis and cannabis-related products, I can tell you that it's anti-tumour and anti-cancer. Oh, if only it was. If only it was. I can tell you that it's not just for humans, but it's good for your cats and dogs. I can tell you that influential people like Dr. Cristina Sanchez tells you that it's important to prescribe, that it's nature's miracle cure, and that it cured her stage 4 breast cancer. Now, I know these are daft and emotive and incorrect, but in a situation where you've got a mitochondrial disease that's going to progress, I think the least we need to know is that it's safe and that it's tolerable in that mitochondrial group as well. The efficacy data may come later, but I think we need to know it's safe in that group. And that's why we need more trials. That's why I think one of the first things I said, that the government's interested now in bankrolling these safety trials is of great interest to us. Self-promotion, if you are interested in something I've written about this or the podcast about it, Google my name and the name of Mark Cunningham, my friend from Newcastle who's left me to go to Dublin. Otherwise, I'll take your questions now. Thank you. Thank you.
We've been told about it, and just because it's cannabis, I've sort of steered away from it. Alex, my son is 13.
Yeah.
He has, that's right, I'll just shout. We've been told that it could help him on his dystonic movements. What's your theory on that?
Yeah, so if the drug was licensed and available, and if there were no strings attached, I think doctors would be happy to experiment. Think about it in the way that we use lots of drugs off license. So, the drug might be used for headache, but I might think it might